Afternoon, fellow commissioners, staff, and guests. Going to start the meeting now of the Historic Preservation Commission. Spencer, could we go ahead and I've called the meeting to order, of course, but could you give the information to the public, please?
Also announce staff. Staff present is Planning Manager Hill, Principal Planner Roveri, and myself, Recording Secretary Argenbright. Information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or by telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In the chamber, we recommend keeping phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Great. And I think we'll do the roll.
Yes, that's what I was gonna.
The roll call.
Yeah.
Going by this wonderful agenda you've given me. Yes, could we do the roll call, please, Spencer?
Chair Column.
Here.
Commissioner Barlow.
Here.
Commissioner Dawson.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
And members absent are Vice Chair Rath, Commissioner O'Neill, and Commissioner Smith-Crivello.
Okay, great. And you've already introduced the staff members that are here. Thank you. So we'll move on to the consent agenda or items. And did everyone get a chance to look at the meetings of April? And are there any questions, corrections, additions? No? Okay. Then I think we'll go ahead and approve those. Did anybody want to motion, please?
I'll move that we approve the minutes as written.
Thanks.
Second.
Thank you, Juan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion carries. All right. Let's see. So, and now, is this where we would ask the public if they have any kind of consent item that's not on the agenda? Would that be
Yeah, or
correct,
any
Amanda?
public comments on items not on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are
Welcome.
we allowing up to 3 minutes or?
I don't see why not. Does anybody have any objection to that? Okay.
Okay,
great.
so let's put the timer.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Armendariz. I came in because next door I was doing some business and I noticed that with this whole meeting agenda, it'd be nice to have some memory of my dad's local history brought out to the forefront and maybe be recognized. He was stationed at Fort Ord and he was a military specialist that his duties were top secret and he was a communications officer. And he passed away June 24th, 2020. He was born November 4th, 1944. He's one of our local war heroes that in talking to a gentleman earlier about the Planning Commission, I was just wondering if a portion of Fort Ord is available for maybe a plaque or even one of the old buildings to be preserved as a historical landmark, and maybe even allowed some of the special heroes to be having names posted. My father, Arturo Rafael Armendariz, is such one of those people that I'd like to be known as someone that did amazing things for our country. His whole lifetime dedicated to off of a single circuit for his operations of his talent of being able to send messages with the fingertip and just tapping. His top secret device was a handheld strapped to his knee and communicating at the King of Siam's palace in Thailand and serving under two different militaries at the same time, the US Army and the Thai Royal Army. His assignment was top secret and not too many people know the history of someone like my dad that did such great things for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Juan, is it? Is your first name Juan?
I'm Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. I'm sorry, Daniel. I don't know where I got the Juan. Forgive me. Okay. Are there any comments or questions on what Daniel just said, or,
Ma-
oh, go ahead, Juan.
I know I'm not specifically addressed, I don't know if that's allowed, but the County of Monterey has a Military and Veterans Affairs office. It may be contacting them might be a good resource for you if you, I honestly don't know. I was kind of thinking what authority could put a plaque in Fort Ord. I know there's a lot of quasi-governmental authorities, but I think a good place to start would be the Military and Veterans Affairs office. They're in, sorry, I thought you were gonna say something. Hmm. Hmm.
And I
That's great.
can,
Thank
I
you,
can
Juan.
respond to that as well as
Okay.
far as
Yes, Levi.
plans for the city's plans for Fort Ord. So you're correct, there is a portion of Fort Ord that is within the city of Monterey's jurisdiction. And there are plans for future development in that area as infrastructure is increased in the area. However, that's going to be done through the implementation and preparation of a specific plan for that entire area, and is kind of as considered as part of our housing element implementation. So we appreciate your comments, and that'll be a multi-year process that we're pretty much just beginning at this point. But there'll be a very active public engagement process through the preparation of that specific plan, and any members of the public that have thoughts or considerations of this nature are encouraged to participate in that public process.
Great. Thank you, Levi, for that input. Okay, anything else? Are we ready to move on to the first public appearance?
There are also no hands raised
Thank you.
online.
Thank you, Spencer. I was just going to ask about that. Okay, and we will have the staff to give a presentation. We are considering signage for 401 Camino El Estero, my former place of employment, and a pedestrian-oriented freestanding sign. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Fernanda Roveri, Principal Planner for the City of Monterey. And before you today is an application, sign application SI 240068 for a pedestrian-oriented freestanding sign at 401 Camino El Estero. The staff recommendation is to approve the sign application with conditions. And a little bit of background. This is the site of the French Consulate Historic Adobe Building. It's zoned OH1, H1 meaning it's a landmark historic resource for the city. It has parks and open space general plan land use designation, and it's the former visitor center. Now, and this is just a photo to show what a nice location it's in.
Yeah. It was nice working there.
Yeah. And this is just showing the front of the Adobe building. The proposal, the sign would be located in the grass area in the front lawn. And it's to advertise the new Monterey Police Department Outreach and Navigation Center. And so we're gonna have our police stationed out there, and it's a place for the community to have access to our police. The sign would be made of kiln dried cedar and put on 2 wooden posts, and it would be hand painted. In order for the HPC to approve the sign proposal, it needs to find that the proposal achieves the purposes and objectives of the sign ordinance. And the response here is that the sign is small, subdued, and integrates well with the French Consulate building and the El Estero Park complex area, which is in a natural setting, and the wooden materials for the sign would complement that setting. The sign uses the minimum necessary design components such as sign area, height, to identify the entity. The proposal is consistent with all applicable sign guidelines or has been determined by the HPC to better achieve the purposes and objectives of the sign ordinance than the strict application of said guidelines. And I should mention that this proposal is before you today because the French Consulate building is a historic building, and so any sign proposals or alterations have to be approved by the HPC. And staff found that the proposal meets all of the sign ordinance objectives and all of the sign guidelines with the exception of the sign height, which was not identified in the sign plans. So staff is recommending a condition that the top of the sign would be no more than 4 feet from the grade below. And the sign guidelines allow up to 6 feet, but staff is recommending 4 feet so that the sign does not overtake the building. It does not detract from it. The third finding is that the proposal is consistent with any other adopted land use document. It's consistent with all of those documents in addition to the Secretary of the Interior standards, because the sign is proposed to be made of historically appropriate materials, which is, that kiln dried cedar and hand painted. And it's also going to be visually subservient to the building. And with that, staff recommends approval with the condition that it be no higher than 4 feet.
Okay.
I'm available for questions. I'm not sure if the applicant is online, but I told him that, if he could, he's welcome to be here, but it's also our police department, and I'm very aware of, what their proposal is for.
Thank you, Fernanda. Are there any comments or anyone who is a guest here today representing this issue? No. Okay. Commissioners, do any of you have something you want to ask, comment on about this? I just had one question. I was wondering, since you can see it, you will be able to see it when you drive by, I'm sure. Why is it called pedestrian oriented? Is there,
So our sign guidelines usually say that if a sign is 20 square feet or below, and it's put on like wooden posts and it's like lower profile, then it qualifies to be labeled pedestrian oriented.
okay.
Vehicle oriented signs can be up to 50 square feet and are meant to be visible to drivers
Right.
driving by.
Thank you.
And this sign would be facing
The street.
what's that, Franklin Street, which is a
Camino
low-
al Estero, I believe.
well, yeah, it would, I mean,
Oh, and part of
you
Franklin,
couldn't,
part
if
of
you drive on
Franklin.
Camino al Estero, you would have to like turn right to
Yes, you would.
face your vision to the right to see it.
Correct.
And that's not good because then you'd be distracted driving. But that's why it was labeled pedestrian oriented.
Yes, well, it's next to the walkway and everything too, I noticed. So, okay, kind of a petty question, but I was just kind of curious about that title. Thank you, Fernanda. Anyone else have a comment? Yes, Carol?
I think it's good to limit it to 4 feet high because the example that the mock-up that's in front of City Hall looked like that was about 4 feet high. And I think that's a good height for it, rather than going with 6 feet.
Yes,
and-
I measured it and it's the one in front of right out here, it's 4 feet.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I concur, and also a lower profile will not, obstruct the facade of the historic building. And I think it's a good looking sign. We have precedence here.
Okay, Spencer, is anyone on the phone or anything there?
There are no attendees with their hands raised.
Okay, then I guess we can go ahead and close comments from the commission and the staff, not the public. So does anyone have a motion about accepting?
I'll move to approve it with a condition as recommended by staff.
Okay, sounds good. Any second?
I second.
Okay, Julie, thank you very much. And let's see, now can I just do a general all in favor, or are you going to do an individual roll call? Can it be general? Okay, all right, all in favor of approving the sign at 401 Camino El Estero, pedestrian oriented freestanding sign, no taller than I assume that's the condition, Juan, no
Yes.
taller than 4 feet. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you all very much. And now let's go ahead, and I think we're going to move on to the second public hearing item. Considering 581 Larkin Street or Scott Street, a historic permit and use permit. Should I read all of that for the second story decks, et cetera, et cetera? Can you? Thank you, Levi. I really
Yeah, I can cover it.
appreciate that.
We'll be getting well into it, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I see my neighbor, Chris Schmidt, kind of prepared this, but I know he's on paternity leave.
Yeah, he has other things going on at the
Yes, he
moment.
does.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So yes, filling in for Chris Schmidt, Levi Hill, Planning Manager for the Planning Division. And the request before us today is a request for historic permit, use permit, and associated historic preservation report for the project at 581 Scott Street. And the staff recommendation for this project is to deny historic permit HP 240007 and use permit UP 240081 for the 2-story addition decks, and also denying the adoption of the associated historic preservation report. So many of you are probably already familiar with this project site. Just here recently, it came before this commission for recommendation for H2 zoning, as well as the to enter into an approved Mills Act contract. But it is here shown once again in this aerial photo, situated along Scott Street between Van Buren Street and Larkin Street, and is an irregular shaped lot, as you can see. So again, just to recap what's happened on this property over the last year or so, there was an application for a Mills Act contract submitted in July of 2023. Around that same time, an application for the residential addition was submitted, originally taken in as an architectural review permit because at that time the property had not been designated historic by this body. The application for the addition was essentially put on pause to see what the determination was going to be for the historic and Mills Act request. As this commission knows, the property was zoned H2 in November of 2023, and then also did have the approval of a Mills Act contract in November of 2023 as City Council. And just to recap, it qualified under local historic resources based on the criteria 1 and 2. And also, as many of you know, this is noted as the Frank Hellum House. So the proposed project is a residential addition application. It's now being processed as a historic permit given the historic designation. The project proposes a 1,308 square foot addition, and that's 816 distributed on the first floor and 492 square feet on the second floor. And there is an associated deck and balcony, and we'll get into the plans in just a moment. So just briefly, this project was reviewed for consistency with the R3 standards. It was found to be consistent with all the development standards in the R3 district. There is one inconsistency that was identified, and that involves the setback that's required from the proposed development and existing accessory structures on the site. 7 feet is the least amount of distance that's being proposed, where 10 feet is required. However, there is a use permit process and has been requested in accordance with the city code sections for incentives for historic preservation of structures. And we'll get into that in more detail in just a moment. So this slide shows the site plan of the proposed project. As you see here, you have the existing house situated and oriented to the north of the site along Scott Street, and the proposed addition is on the southern portion of the property situated in the rear of the property behind the existing house. This is a look at the existing front elevation and the proposed front elevation as viewed from Scott Street. And you can kind of see the outline of the proposed structure in the background on the lower image. And then that's the balcony on the left side of that image. This is the existing side elevation situated next to the proposed side elevation. This is as viewed from Van Buren. And this is the other side elevation along the western portion, facing the western portion of the property. And this is the proposed elevation and existing elevation as viewed from the rear of the site. So getting into the Secretary of Interior standards, so there's kind of a lot to unpack here, so please bear with me. Essentially, there was a historic preservation report prepared for the site by architectural historian Meg Clovis in association with the application. It contains information that was supportive of the modifications. That historic preservation report was peer reviewed by city's historic preservation consultant, Page and Turnbull. For the majority of the Secretary of Interior standards, 8 out of the 10 standards were found in concurrence, that it was consistent with those standards. However, there was 2 potential inconsistencies that were identified in that peer review historic preservation report. So I figured it's best use of our time to focus on those 2 standards.
Great.
So SOI standard number 2, this is one of the ones that was found to be potentially inconsistent. And Page and Turnbull reviewed this standard, and obviously, as is shown on this slide, the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Page and Turnbull found that there are 3 openings that appear to date within the period of significance that could be considered character-defining features and would be altered in the design. It also noted, the peer review also noted that the project would alter the original roof line by replacing the shed roof dormer with the larger gable dormer, and that the project would physically connect to new construction with the historic fabric of the original residence. And then moving on to Secretary of Interior standard number 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. In Page and Turnbull's peer review, they noted that the proposed flat roof, the blocky massing, and broad glazing are not entirely compatible with the character of the hip and gable roofs and more typical residential fenestration of the historic buildings on the property. They also noted that when viewed from the northeast and east along Scott and Van Buren Streets, the proposed addition would introduce a stark visual contrast in the form and materials. Some additional notes that they made in regards to this standard was the hyphen may undermine the intent to provide a 1-story separation between the 1.5-story historic house and the 2-story proposed addition, given that there's a deck on the top of that hyphen, and that the extent of glazing and size of the openings would be much greater at the proposed addition than the historic house, and that the extensive glazing on the proposed addition would be incompatible in design and materials with the character of the historic building. Page and Turnbull in their report offered a series of recommendations that were also provided in the staff report, but we can highlight just a few of those. And then obviously this report was also provided to the applicant who's prepared a presentation, so I'm sure they'll be able to respond to how they've either incorporated some of these recommendations or not, but we can run through them very quickly. So some of the recommendations were to retain some of the window openings, restore some of the original openings on the west facade, and just reducing the project's impact to those openings and character defining features. There was also a recommendation, and I've kind of highlighted some of the more, I would say, significant recommendations from the proposed project here in orange. So just to kind of highlight the high points. So one of those is an omission of the second floor entrance to the deck, noting that it would reduce the project's impact to the original roof line. Another one of the recommendations is the possibility of omitting the sunroom hyphen roof deck. So again, kind of tied to that original recommendation of eliminating the second floor entrance. Let's see. There's quite a few recommendations. There's recommendation to possibly set the proposed addition further back to allow the gabled roof to remain visible over the hyphen. They did know that that would require the relocation of the wash house and tack room. So that's kind of a significant impact if that recommendation was to be followed. They also recommended the incorporation of gabled hip and shed roofs at the new addition, both at the hyphen and at the two-story portion. They recommended a reduction in the size and number of the proposed openings at the east facade of the addition, increasing compatibility with the fenestration pattern. And then some materials recommendations as well were provided. And then one of the more significant recommendations or departures from the proposed project was a recommendation of the possibility of constructing just a one-story detached accessory dwelling unit within the parcel instead of a rear addition. So I will note that the applicant, we did want to recognize that the applicant did receive this report and did incorporate some of the recommendations into their project design. So they did make a modification to the south-facing dormer following one of those recommendations. And they also made a change to the proposed deck railing based on the recommendations. The original design had a cable railing, and Page and Turnbull recommended a transparent railing in glass, and that has also been incorporated. And just wanted to note, as you'll see on the slide, that the HPC may consider requiring a combination of the above Page and Turnbull suggestions to bring the project into consistency with the SOI standards and reduce impacts, or none of the recommendations. So we'll get into the other associated permits that have been requested as a part of this project. The first being the use permit. City Code Section 38-76H allows for a process to modify underlying zoning requirements in the way of a use permit for setbacks, parking standards, and floor area ratio. If standards contribute to preservation of historic setting or minimizes or eliminates impacts of alteration on a historic resource, and that the HPC must make a recommendation to the Planning Commission for approval of this use permit. And then here are the findings to make such recommendation, and ultimately if the Planning Commission was inclined to approve the use permit. So these are your standard use permit findings. As noted here, and then there's 2 additional findings that are required specifically for this type of use permit. So those specific findings that relate to historic incentives, as shown here, finding 4 impacts of the use, including traffic and parking, would not be detrimental to the surrounding area. Staff found that this project would meet that finding and that there would be no impact. And then the finding number 5 is additional uses conform to an adopted historic preservation report and are necessary for the preservation of a historic resource or historic interior. And that's where the discretion of this commission comes back into play, is whether or not the historic preservation report is adopted and is the work is found to be necessary for the preservation. And then finally, the other associated request with this project is the adoption of the historic preservation report. The City Code, Article 15, requires adoption of a historic preservation report for alterations to H2 designated buildings, which is what is before you. And the HPC has the authority to adopt historic preservation reports and issue historic permits for alteration, which is also what's before you. Historic permits shall be issued only upon a finding that the proposed work is consistent with an adopted historic preservation report and the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And that is also what you're here to decide today. And these are just quickly the findings for, or the requirements, I should say, for historic preservation reports. And staff takes no issue with any of these requirements except for subsection E there that requires that the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties is met. And that's what's before you today. So just to recap, I know there's a lot to kind of going on there. So just wanted to kind of recap what the authority of the HPC is with this request. So essentially, you've been provided with 2 historic preservation reports with differing conclusions, or at least identifying some areas of potential inconsistency. And just wanted to be clear that HPC has the authority and the discretion to take the information presented into the record to determine the project's consistency with the SOI standards. If the project is found to be inconsistent by the HPC with the SOI standards, the requisite findings for these associated permits cannot be made. Alternatively, if the project is found to be consistent with the SOI standards, the requisite findings can be made. And with that, the staff recommendation is for the HPC to adopt a resolution denying historic permits and use permits for a 2-story addition and decks, and denying adoption of the historic preservation report for the single-family dwelling at 581 Scott Street. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And the applicant is also here. They have a presentation as well prepared.
Yes, I was going to ask that. Thank you, Levi. That was very detailed and informative. So we do have the architectural historian, Meg Clovis, here too, I believe. So would the applicant like to speak first, or would Ms. Clovis like to? It's up
And
to you.
if we could just make sure there's no questions for staff before we get into the applicant
Okay,
presentation.
all right. Are there questions for the staff at this point?
I have a quick question, Levi.
Sure.
What is the exact proposed square footage of the addition? I see a couple numbers in the report, like 1308.
So it's
and
1308 is the total, and that's
Mhm.
distributed between, I think it's 800 on the first floor, and then the
Yeah.
remainder's on the, but it is 1308 is the total square foot of the
Okay.
addition.
Okay.
The existing residence, I believe, is around 1,500 square feet.
Okay.
Yes, 1568.
There are some points, and I think in the report it says 1088 for the proposed addition.
Thank you.
So, okay, so that's good to know. And then just one clarity, where is the city considering the front setback to be?
That would be off Scott Street.
Scott Street, okay.
That's correct.
Mhm. Okay. All right, any other comments here? All right, so it's up to you folks. Whoever would like to speak first, please, and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Liam O'Brien. My presentation will probably be very similar in length to Levi's, so if you can bear with me on that. Can I just check this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. My name is Liam O'Brien, one of the owners of the Helm House, along with my wife Julie, who is here this evening, and sister and brother-in-law Helena and David McLaughlin, who unfortunately are unable to attend tonight's hearing. In our presentation, I'd like to review the following items, starting with our overview, followed by where we started, what we have done, what we are working on, and where we are going. Our introduction. The Frank Helm House meets California Register Criterion 2 person as the home of prominent businessman Frank Helm, who made significant contributions to the community and economy of the city of Monterey. By adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, we aim to preserve the integrity of the Frank Helm House, ensuring it continues to reflect Helm's contributions to Monterey. As stewards of the Helm House, it is our intent to preserve not only its architectural integrity, but also the historical legacy of its owner, ensuring that future generations can appreciate the profound impact of Frank Helm on the history of Monterey, California. I'd like to review the communication timelines with planners and building department from day one. We closed on the purchase of the property on January 4, 2023. Prior to closing, we engaged with Meg Clovis, our historian, based on a recommendation from Kimberly Cole in community development. Meg in turn recommended our architect, John Skirks, who I'd like to point out is currently the chair of the Monterey County Historic Resources Review Board and has been for the last 20 plus years and still is. Oh, sorry. First one, January. Okay. Both in attendance this evening. Prior to commencement of any work, all parties met with planning staff on February 15 to discuss a collaborative approach to the project. Our intention was to create a partnership with the city in order to navigate the complex task ahead of us and to fully understand and comply with all city rules and regulations pertaining specifically to our property. We also had a follow-up meeting on June 9th. On August 7th, we had an on-site meeting to review the location and intentions for a two-story addition. We met again to review on August 18th. After those meetings, we submitted informal plans on September 6th. With some back and forth with planning and building departments on building separations related to the non-historic tack room and wash house and moving the proposed addition 3 feet towards Van Buren, we submitted our formal package on December 10th. It wasn't until January 31st that planning notified us that they may not support the project, which we were blown away by given all our efforts up to that point. They requested a third-party review, which took the best part of 3 months to obtain. After we received our report, we scheduled a follow-up in-person meeting on May 8th to discuss the third-party report. Prior to that meeting, we submitted revised plans with our concessions on April 17th to accommodate a third-party report. It's not clear to me if those plans were considered part of the formal submittal, but they failed to make it onto the staff report. These revisions may not have been considered part of the formal submittal, but we made it clear to the planning manager that this was our direction. It's unclear why they failed to include it in this report. Then we'll move on to, towards the end of 23, we continue, moving on to building permits. After multiple meetings with the building department, we were able to obtain a building permit to remodel the home on April 17, 2023, and our deck permit on September 15th. We worked continuously with the building department during the course of construction as we came across multiple unforeseen issues. We are so grateful for the help and guidance for our building official for how this process was handled with such urgency and efficiency, yet following stringent guidelines. Towards the end of 2023, we continued to focus on the Mills Act application and attended multiple hearings, which ultimately was approved on December 15th. During those hearings, we were so pleased with feedback from the Historic Board and City Council on the status of our efforts. We continue to have neighbors stop and speak to us as they pass by our home and compliment us on the transformation of the house and property. Next is the initial glimpse. We have some photos here of the condition of the house and property from the day of purchase. As you can see, it was overgrown, and some would say the house was in a state of disrepair. Chimney was falling apart, windows rotting out, water flowed through the roof into the house, raccoons nested in the attic space, mold was evident. I could go on. These are not complaints. Since Dave and I own our own custom home construction business, we accepted the challenge to bring the structure back to life to the best of our ability. I believe Frank Hallam will be pleased and proud of our efforts. Now on to concessions made in response to Page and Turnbull report. And all concessions below are included in our plan revisions submitted on April 17th of this year, which were also discussed at our May 8th meeting with planning staff. We moved the building 3 feet forward per staff recommendations, which in turn saved a tree. We eliminated second floor access through to the deck from the main house in order to maintain the existing dormer. The staff report failed to note this concession on findings number 2 in the report. In addition to findings number 2, the hyphen between old and new, although would be enclosed, would not change significantly. We show full height and width glass doors, which would allow visibility to the current elevation in question. We have no plans to remove the siding, only replace the window with an existing interior door. There's also reference to the recently removed addition on the south side. This addition was built in the 1960s per Dick Hallam, the previous owner, and not 1900 to 1936 period as described in the report. The door in question on the south end of the west elevation was installed by a tenant approximately 15 years ago, so I can't imagine this is considered historical. We modified the deck rail the deck metal rails to glass. Although this is a concession, we're pleased with the recommendation. Not part of the third-party review was a single door we installed for access to the newly installed deck. We initially wanted to install a larger unit, but Meg would not approve. We're very happy with her decision and result. The planning manager recommend we build a one-story addition or build an ADU somewhere else on the property. We are unwilling to sacrifice the second story due to the needs of our family. The whole project would be pointless, nor do we have the desire or funds to design an alternate location at this point, given the hurdles we're facing today. Our buildable area, to note, with the new addition would be at 12% of the 35% allowed for the property. It seems pretty insignificant in the grand scheme. Then on to neighborhood standards. The report refers to building a two-story structure with a flat roof. I'd like to point out the surrounding properties with flat roofs. As you can see, there's 7 within a stone's throw from our property. Progress. The following photos show the before and after photos to date. You'll notice Van Buren is barely visible. We also replanted bougainvillea that once draped over the wall. As you can see, we've made some major progress. And there's some extra photos. Then work completed. On the property, we repaired and replaced fencing on all sides, cleared overgrown vegetation and debris, hired arborists to revive trees, planted perimeter screening. Exterior, repaired and replaced damaged roof, repaired all windows, repaired chimney, refinished siding. Interior, stripped mold-covered walls and replastered, refinished wood, walls, floors, leveled floors, installed plumbing, wiring, heating, and restored the kitchen. What we are working on. We're currently in the process of remodeling the non-historic tack room and wash house. Although these are non-historic structures, we felt it was incredibly important to save these to honor the property. After consulting with planning and building, both agreed if the proposed addition was approved, the separation issue could be resolved. Hence why we applied for a building permit to remodel these structures now. Now, in the staff report, they rejected our application for setback incentive. This was another complete surprise given the more recent level of communication between all parties regarding this issue. If the addition was to be approved today, we feel we'd be forced into demolishing these structures. The only alternative would be to remove these structures, expand southwards for a one-story addition, being the only direction we could go to meet the Secretary of Interior standards, which would mean a much larger footprint, Although these structures are not considered significant in the historic sense, we feel it would be a huge loss to the history and character of the property. It states in Preservation 14, there is no formula or prescription for designing a compatible new addition. A new addition as to a historic building that meets. I got to finish, please. I mean, I think it's very important I finish this.
Yeah, we're very interested.
I really want to finish this presentation. Thank you. I'm going to start again. It states in Preservation 14, there is no formula or prescription for designing a compatible new addition. A new addition to the historic building that meets the standards can be an architectural style, traditionalist, contemporary, or a simplified version of the historic building. However, there must be a balance between differentiation and compatibility in order to maintain the historic character and the very identity of the building being enlarged. The following references a paragraph from the Page and Turnbull report. Although they concluded criteria 2 and 9 do not comply with the Secretary of Interior standards, it states in the report, as depicted in the project drawings reviewed by Page and Turnbull, the entire two-story portion of the rear addition would extend to the east of the east wall plane of the historic house. While it may be preferable overall to minimize the visibility of a rear addition from public rights of way by aligning or setting it back from the planes of a historic building, in the case of the subject property, the proposed addition is set sufficiently to the rear that its proposed massing would not have a detrimental visual impact. Further, as the historic building is set within a largely undeveloped lot that is visible not only from Scott Street, but also Van Buren Street to the east. Altering the alignment of the east facade of the proposed addition would have little impact on its visibility from public rights of way. With that said, we're still more than willing to make the concessions submitted to planning regardless of this description. The next slide shows an aerial view of the approximate footprint of the addition. Note the location of the tack house and washroom. We engaged with a landscape architect who walked the property with us along with a certified arborist prior to plant removal and tree trimming. He also provided a preliminary future landscape plan. All perimeter plants and screening have been installed. Rehabilitation is defined as the process of returning a property to a state of utility through repair or alteration, which makes possible an efficient contemporary use while preserving those portions and features of the property which are significant to its historic, architectural, and cultural values. The next 3D image shows a different angle to the proposed addition. I'd like to note this viewpoint does not show the wall which would block this view from Scott Street. And finally, we plan on revitalizing the tobacco warehouse and garage structure that was built from the horse barn related to the tack room. I hope you take all our efforts into consideration when making your decision. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening from the O'Brien and McLaughlin family. We look forward to continuing working on our vision for the Helm house and property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien. That was very good, very thorough. Let's see, does anybody want to comment on this presentation, or shall we continue maybe with the historian?
You may ask questions of the applicant.
All right. Do any of you have questions for Mr. O'Brien? One, Julie?
I have a quick question, kind of slightly unrelated, but it does relate. So has there been confirmation of water credits for the 4 bathrooms?
Yes,
Okay, so that just came with the
that
property.
was part of the application.
Okay,
We filled out those forms.
okay.
Okay, good question. Thank
Yeah.
you, Julie. Thank you, sir.
I have a question of staff related to the presentation. Is that appropriate at this moment or no?
Staff can answer questions.
So the applicant mentioned that some of the condition or the concessions that they made were not included or not considered for the recommendation. Is that true? Or did you consider all the concessions that the applicant made?
Yeah, they were considered. They're just noted instead of in the standards of the report, they're noted under the recommendations. You'll see there's notes under certain ones where concessions were made or modifications were made to the design.
So all all the proposed concessions as presented by the applicant, staff reviewed, and despite that, there's still the recommendation not to approve.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? There's anybody on the phone or online or anything there, Spencer?
I see no attendees with their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. All right, can we proceed then with the, oh,
I
yes?
guess, was that your request for public comment? Or is that,
Yes,
oh, okay.
as it was.
I just want to open it up to anyone present in the chambers as well.
Oh, all right. Yes, are there any comments from those attending? Daniel, yes.
Please come to the podium.
Okay, yeah, you'll have to.
Just, I don't fully know the area he's been talking about, but just a simple question, how close to the downtown, how close to the State Park Plaza area is this building?
I'm sorry, this is a portion of the meeting where you just make public comment on the actual item that's been presented. We're not actually allowed to engage in dialogue.
I
So
just want to know how close it is.
I
to
understand that we can't
historical-
answer questions.
historical
It's a
site.
public comment period, so you can comment on the item. It's just the way the meeting works. So I can follow up with you after the meeting and answer the question, but I can't answer you right now.
Okay, can I add something then?
You can make a comment to the commission.
I saw that was tobacco processing plant, and And I don't know what exactly the building was or going to be, but my question would be, is it trying to be preserved as a tobacco building or is it going to be changed to?
Again, we can't answer the questions. This is a public comment on the presentation that was just provided.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Yes, Mr. Seavey, good to see you. Thank you.
Kent CV, I'm a historic preservation consultant, and I've been here 50 years. And in that 50 years, I've always wondered why the city hadn't turned that corner into a park. And guess what? A couple of Irishmen come along and do that. And take a building that I've looked at time and time again and had an opportunity to talk to the owners about, the earlier owners. And, I was amazed that nothing had ever been done because of the Helm connection with the community. And so what I'd like to say is these guys have done a heck of a job. And my understanding of the standards is there are a lot of them that say recommended, not recommended, but recommended is recommended, not you will, you won't. And I think this is a really good project and set with the lot proportions and the kind of massing that takes place. And I come up there quite often because an organization I'm working with is working with the Monterey History and Art for one of the houses as our facility. I think it's a very good project. I don't understand why it's being beat up, given the amount of work that's gone into it, but that's the municipal process. I would strongly recommend that you agree with the owner and protect this building by giving it historic status. It already has, but allowing them to continue with the project they're going ahead with, as they say they're going to work with you in every way they can to finish it. But walking up that street, you can't see basically except the second floor of that other place. Driving up the street, you shouldn't be able to see it because that's a well-traveled road. Your two connections there. You can't see it from Van Buren because of the trees that are still there. I'm somewhat hard pressed about the size, configuration, and the fact they're going to lower it down, and the fact that indeed there are 7 other flat roofed houses within a block. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Carol, did you have a comment?
Yeah, could you show that, you had a slide that showed a concept drawing of how the addition would look. Could you show that again? Because that was
Yes.
very,
It was.
very helpful. And is that with a
I'm sorry, are
lower
we
height than
still in
what
public
you're showing
comment?
in the
Have we
plans?
completed public comment? Can we
I'm
confirm-
sorry, what
Can we
was that?
confirm that there's no other members of
Oh,
the public
that's
that
what
want to
that
speak?
noise. All right. Yes, we're still continuing with public comment. All right.
There are no attendees online with their hands raised for public comment.
All right. So can I turn it back to the commissioners if they have a question?
So we are at the point that the commission is making comments and discussing.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So,
Yeah,
Carol,
that was my question.
Please
Yeah, if you could just
continue,
show
Carol.
that concept drawing. Now, is that a lower height than what is shown in the plans, or is that what's shown in the plans that we have in our
That's
staff
a
report?
rendering of what's on the plans.
Okay.
yes, it's just towards the end there.
Yeah, like 2-3 slides. or-
Yes, just
That's a good
I know.
slide to look at.
there it
Yeah, it was
is.
a really
That's
good
it.
job.
That's it.
It looks a lot better in this than it does on the plans.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
Can you move it to the other one that you're looking, that one?
That one,
Perfect, thank
yeah.
you.
you have done a wonderful job, if I may just say that for everything you've done so far. It's amazing.
Appreciate that.
Julie,
So I'll maybe kind of start off here. I agree, you guys have done a phenomenal job. The house looks beautiful and opening up the property, invites interest and curiosity. And so thank you for doing that. to me, a little bit of the puzzle, because now that we have the H2 zoning, we're looking at it a bit through the need to preserve and protect. And I see a lot of good effort for differentiation, and yet keeping some with the compatibility. I personally think maybe putting up some story polls prior to the meeting would have been helpful for some of the commissioners, including myself, to view the massing in relation to the existing building. We're talking about seeing the elevations. Oh,
We actually asked planning staff if we needed story poles. We were willing to put story poles up,
okay.
but it wasn't a requirement.
Yeah, it's not, okay. Well, I'm just saying, it would have been helpful with the elevations that we have to maybe see that.
Sure.
Because obviously the reaction to the rendering, shows kind of different perspective and angle. And I know enough with renderings, depending where you take it from, it looks a little bit different. I do have some concern about the consistency with H2 zoning and the addition itself being subordinate to the historic building. It's about 45%, increase in size from the existing. And I know that's just a number, but depending on the viewpoint of the building, particularly the 2-story and the block kind of configuration of it, I pause a little bit on that. I'm interested to see what the other commissioners have to say. But I do recognize, a lot of the attempts to differentiate itself. And anyway, I'll pause with some other comment when I start hearing others.
Yes, do any of you others have a comment?
I'll just echo the great, excellent work you've done to the existing building. Night and day from the pictures that you showed. So thank you for that, for doing that for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And Carol, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask?
Just I'm concerned about the massing and the size also, because if the original building is 1,600 square feet and you're proposing to add 1,300 square feet, that's almost doubling the size.
2,800, about 2,800, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that against rules or regulations or?
So I'm sorry, we're supposed to be in commissioner comments and deliberation, so we're not in the public hearing portion of the meeting.
Yeah.
I know, and I'm not it's
Well,
just,
the
we really
problem
shouldn't be
is because
engaging unless we're gonna,
subjective.
unless we're gonna reopen the public hearing. We need to
Okay.
keep the comments and deliberation amongst the commission. We can reopen the public hearing if we want to engage the applicant again, but it's just important that we follow the procedures.
Would you like the public hearing open? Maybe someone else in the audience has a
No.
comment too.
No.
No, okay. I guess we're all right then. And did anyone else want to make a presentation? Fernanda? Okay, then are we ready for a vote, folks?
Or a
Anybody-
motion.
Are we done talking internal? Yeah.
Yeah, just because the public hearing's
Yeah.
closed doesn't mean the four of you can't still talk amongst
Yeah.
yourselves or discuss the project.
Yeah, I know. I wish some of the others were on Zoom or something, darn it. Anything else? I mean,
I'll continue then.
well, I can move
Yeah.
into the house the way it is right now. That's how I feel.
Well,
personally.
at this point with the historic preservation report, I can't see clearly that this is exempt from CEQA, because I don't necessarily see that there's not going to be a potential impact to the resource. So without maybe some modifications or concurrence, I mean, I assume then the response to the peer review, I mean, we would need to see an updated report potentially to say this is exempt. And
So the commission, excellent question. The commission has the discretion, since they have two reports prepared by qualified professionals, that the commission does have the discretion to defer to one report over the other. One report essentially finds that the project is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. The other report does not make that finding. There is a CEQA exemption that can still be applied if this commission decided that the Secretary of Interior standards can be met. So that'd be a 15303 finding.
Yeah.
But again, that would be dependent on the commission making the determination that the Secretary of Interior standards are met with this project. You're correct, Commissioner Barlow. If you cannot make those findings, then the project would not be exempt from CEQA. Unless it was denied, which of course denied projects are not subject to CEQA.
So question for you, if we have two reports, right? One requested by the city, one by the applicant, is there a procedure or a process to get a third one that could mediate between the reports?
There's not a formal process. If it were the commission's, if the commission was inclined to do so, the city can go through a separate consultant that we have on call and have a third report prepared. That would be, I think, the only avenue to get to that point. I don't think we would, the applicant would probably not be in favor of contracting another consultant. I would defer to them for that, but I would assume no. So, I mean, that would be the process to do that, but it would come at the cost of the city.
Wasn't that one of the recommendations by the Turnbull group to get another archaeologist involved or another report? That's what I'm looking for right now. I'm sorry, but I saw that as one of the recommendations they made. Yeah. Was it?
Oh, in addition to
In
the
addition
architect.
to, right.
That's correct, and that was incorporated as
Yes, that was
as a recommendation if the project were to move forward and would be applied as a condition of approval.
All right. Okay, yeah, that was it. All right, thank you.
So Levi, the attachments in the staff report, the plans do not reflect the changes or the concessions that the applicant was talking about today. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that they do. They were addressed in the recommendations under the Page and Turnbull. I think I made a comment about the entryway into the upper deck, but yeah, I wasn't aware of a later iteration of plans beyond what was provided in the packet.
Okay.
Levi, that was partially correct. I found the exact paragraph that I highlighted. Page and Turnbull recommends that the project be subject to a condition of approval that if archaeological resources are encountered during ground disturbing project activities, work will halt at the location of the discovery, and in consultation with the city, the project applicant will retain a qualified professional archaeologist to identify and evaluate the deposits. I knew it was something about when the project was actually getting started.
Correct. That would be a in construction
Right.
mitigation.
If we get to that.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's room to compromise. I mean, the applicants are doing a fantastic job. I see some issues with the new with the rendering. I mean, I would love to see it a different way, but I'm wondering if the applicant would be interested in maybe going paying half maybe of a third consultant that could review both plans and kind of mediate. And I mean, I don't know if we can make a commitment that we'll accept everything that the third party will say, but it's clear that there's this separation. They've done a great job of doing it, of everything that they've been doing. So I hate to say no today without maybe finding some way to conciliate, maybe making some concessions. I don't know what you all.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we were even to recommend another report, which I'm not necessarily advocating, I mean, that would imply that there's going to be some revisions, design revisions.
Right.
Based on some feedback that we're giving. And
Right.
I mean, if anything, I think we owe the applicant more concrete feedback
Right.
at this point to give some direction. I mean, especially if we're going to continue or deny, one of those. I mean, I've expressed some concern of the scale maybe, and some of the amount of glazing. I would advocate for wood windows as well. But, you know, I don't necessarily, I want to hear what the other commissioners say. And, you know, I agree. I don't necessarily want to come out and deny this effort. This is the first time we've seen it. And I think there, you know, there could be some things that we want to see revised. If, you know, if not all the concessions are in the plans, we'd probably want to see some updated plans. I personally would want to see some, you know, story polls so we can go out there and kind of view the scale from different angles. You know, clarify the questions that are being raised through the peer review.
What, oh,
Go ahead, Juan. I just going to say you both make very valid points.
windows are actually one of the things that popped up too for me.
Yeah.
In the new rendering. But I'm not an architect, you know, that's, and there's two saying opposite things, but I agree with you. I mean, if there's other way that we can see it differently, I'm all for it. I thought, you know, because defer to the experts, right? That's why I was suggesting the other report, but you're right. I mean, that the windows is one of the things that really pop up for me, that maybe it doesn't look as consistent with the original building.
Do all of you feel that if the other commissioners were here too, we could make a more proper motion? What do you think? There are three missing.
I mean, I still think we would need to provide better direction rather than, you know, making the applicant wait, you know, a month or two. I don't think that's being fair, but, you know, I mean, maybe if there's, I mean, maybe if there's more interest in having more voices here.
I hate for the applicant to wait too. In theory, if there was another report, how long typically do those take? Do you know?
Yeah, for us to bring on a separate on-call, it would take a series of months. We have an existing on-call that's already reviewed the project. So if there were revisions that were made to the project, it would be much faster for us to just have those reviewed once more by the group that's already reviewed that. But yeah, I think you're all making excellent points. I think, and Commissioner Barlow, I think you're correct. I think it'd be very helpful if you were inclined to not make a final decision on this item tonight. I think it would be helpful to provide some very specific design guidance. I'm hearing some reoccurring themes that the scale may be a little disproportionate, some stuff about the glazing with the windows and also materials. So things along that line, if we can just, you know, if you are inclined to continue the item to a future date for redesign, if you can provide that design feedback, the applicant may be inclined to make those changes, perhaps not. I can't speak for them. But it would also give an ability to install story poles if the commission felt like that would also help in aiding in their decision.
Very well put, Levi. Yes, Carol.
I feel really bad for the applicant because they've been working with the city for more than a year and they've been trying to follow all the rules. And it seems that the rules have changed. The reason I would want to continue is that this is a really big decision. And before I came here, looking at the plans, I was ready to turn it down. But now listening to the applicant, you know, I'm kind of turning the other way. And this is too big of a decision to be made lightly.
I do agree.
And while I hate to have you have to come back in another month, I also would hate to turn you down unnecessarily.
True.
Because I know you've already invested a huge amount of money in this project and I don't want you to have to hire another consultant. I don't want you to have to do redesign unnecessarily.
In fairness, we do have a quorum tonight. So if we are to continue the item, it should not be for a lack of commissioners being here. If we continue again, we need to be providing concrete, specific guidance to the applicant.
Okay, well, the applicant had a comment.
Again, we're out of the public hearing. So if we want to engage the applicant, we'll need to reopen the
Yes.
public hearing.
Yes, could we please reopen the public hearing and hear what Mr. O'Brien has to add?
This is the position we didn't want to be in. We didn't want to come back. We went in from day one and we wanted to work with the city and do everything we could to the best of our abilities to work with everybody and to get our project through. Now we're going down this rabbit hole of redesign, story poles, you know, this whole, and then for that, it still could be denied. So we're not in the position to redesign. We don't have an endless amount of funds.
Yeah.
So I just think we're at a loss.
But
I think even with the massing,
Mhm.
we can't, if we were to go down, like I said in the presentation, we would have to go out. We would have to remove the tack house
Mm.
and the washroom. And I don't think that's, even though they're not significant, I would hate to lose those buildings. The structures are, although they're in, pretty much disrepair, we can bring them back to life.
The reason I think a lot of us are inclined to kind of move it a little bit is because I agree with a couple of my commissioners that I was ready to say no, but I mean, there's your presentation and the city's presentation, frankly,
Sure.
I mean, raised questions. So I'm just wondering if you're at a complete impasse with the city, that there's absolutely no room. I understand this costs money, and even delaying it costs money and frustration and emotional costs, everything. But is there no room?
Well, I think when trying to meet our family's needs,
Yeah.
we needed 2 stories. We needed 2 suites. And we've got, myself and my wife and her family, and my sister and brother-in-law and their family. And 2 suites, which is all it is.
Yeah.
It's not this massive, structure, is just meeting the needs of our family.
Right.
And in meeting those needs, we're saving the tack house. We're saving the washroom.
Right.
We're trying to incorporate it all. We know there's setback or separation issues, which we have discussed with the city, with planning and building department. They could be worked through, no problem at all.
Right.
It was figured that we could, but yet that's been now denied as well.
And I'll be frank with all of you. I don't have a problem with the size, because I heard you about what's the whole point of rehabilitating the building if it's not going to meet our needs, right? There has
Yeah.
to be some incentive to do that.
Sure.
It's design. Some of the design features is what I have an issue with. But like I said, I'm not an architect.
With the original architecture,
Right.
design with that
The
original.
compatibility between the
That's what
original
I'm having
architecture with
problems with.
the new structure. Size,
And
Yeah.
sorry, and part of the problem with the flat roof compared to a pitched roof is we would exceed the height limitation for
too
the
tall.
city.
oh,
Yeah.
So we've kind of reviewed that as well.
Can you speak a bit on your thoughts of one of the recommendations for a detached accessory structure?
No, because we want it as part of a home. This is a home. It's not a compound. We want it part of a house all together as one. Even though we have the space to do whatever we want. And not only that, I think if we go down that road too, we're still up against all these guidelines. And it's like we don't know what hurdles we're going to have to hit in ADU because we're a historical property. So
Yeah,
where
it'd
does
be
where does
it'd
it
be
end?
treated a little, I mean, it still would have to be reviewed in context, but it definitely would be having different parameters. I'm just,
But again, it's going down this rabbit hole that we didn't want to go down. That's why we hired John and Meg, very well known and respected in the area in their fields. A lot of experience.
Mhm. I don't know.
I think,
Yes, Mr. Seavey, would you like to add something?
I'm curious why the client and the city couldn't talk about painting it into the landscape.
Doing what with the
Painting
lands-
the building into the landscape. It's white. Going up that hill in an automobile, you're looking hither, thither, and you gotta be walking to see it and find it and stand tall over that fence. But if they'd consider a color that took care of the landscape, fell into the landscape, you could have the mass, but you wouldn't see it. Just a
Moss
thought.
Green.
No, I don't know. They've cleared quite a bit. I can see it quite well, actually, from both streets, except from Van Buren. But Scott, and what's the one where Perry House is? That street.
Van Buren.
Van Buren. I can see it very well. I mean,
I,
A year and a half ago, you couldn't see that.
oh, you are correct. That's why I was showing my colleagues here those pictures,
Yeah.
Mr. O'Brien, what a difference that you have made.
Thank you.
So we need to be cognizant that there may be other people that would like to speak, maybe online. I just want to try to
Alright. Is anyone
keep the
else
structure of the meeting.
joined?
There are no attendees with their hands raised.
Okay. Yes, sir. Is this the architect perhaps?
Yeah, hello, my name's John Skorkus. I'm the architect on the project. And, we worked very hard to make this happen. And, you have to admire somebody that, with restoration, you're familiar that a lot of time you get resistance, and these two contractors came together and they did a great job, and then part of that great job is the making the home what they say is a contemporary use, right? So it works for them and works for their needs. And that's where you kind of have to compromise a little bit. We worked hard and we found there's 5 properties or 5 buildings on the property. 3 are historic, 2 aren't, and the ones that aren't are the wash house and the tack room. And so what they're doing is they're using those 2 for the laundry and a small office, home office. And we could have incorporated those into the building, which would have made the footprint even bigger, but they chose to keep those as a resource. So it actually reduced the footprint by using those as still uses for the building, but separate. The footprint was very small. We talked to Meg and that was what we had. And if you look at the plans, we have the hyphen, single story, it's kept below the eave of the roof. So we're not touching any, altering the roof at all. And then the taller form is the spiral stair. And that's where you see a lot of the glass. And the point of that was to, it's a contemporary design, but it was also to add more transparency. Because if you take that form and you put it like in wood, it becomes a larger mass. But the more you can make it transparent, it just kind of disappears more. I mean, I know you see it as a window, but in reality, when you see it, you're not seeing it as a massive like wood or, it just becomes lighter, more transparent from inside and outside. And then it helps incorporate the view. And the 2-story, that's the footprint we had to work in, and basically, we've got a hyphen, a spiral stair and 2 bedrooms, and that's the addition. And that's what makes it, useful to them and kind of takes it over that line. And that gives them the value for doing the historic portion of that. And there has to be some accommodation for having them make that step to restore something that you could have lost. And then wanting something smaller just to make it livable for them. And I think that's where you have to really look at this, because I think it's a good design. I think it's modest, it's simple. Paige Trimble says it's subordinate to the original house, which is, what you want. And they also said from both streets, it's not a deterrent visually. So, I mean, it basically all complies and it meets the definition, of what we're trying to do. And I think there's a lot there, and that's why we really don't have a lot of room to move with, it's kind of there, it's kind of in the footprint. It meets their program. It's a minimal program. They're not asking for a pool room, pool house or anything. It's just a very minimal needs to make it work for them. And so that's why when you say, design, and there's not a lot of room to do much. And I think we've offered a pretty good solution. And none of the 2-story portion.
I'm sorry,
touches-
your time's up, but the chair can extend your time if she chooses to. But we do have to keep the order of the meeting.
Yes, let him finish, please.
So none of the 2-story portion of the addition touches the original house. It's all a 1-story hyphen. So when you're looking at the 2-story never touches the original house. So it's very clean, it's very separate, and it's very simple and identified. And one of the other components that we had is, there's 5 buildings. And then if you try and do something with the design, because it came up, do a hip roof, do a shed roof, but all that, we couldn't do that, 1, because of the height. And then 2, each structure existing has a different roof pitch and a different material. So if you tried to do something with that, you'd be competing with every building there and you'd end up with something that was undesirable. This way you have a nice clean form. And then you have the 5 buildings that are the original buildings, so you could identify kind of the site structures and the history of the site by these buildings. And then you see the more contemporary simple building. And I think that really helps accentuate the history of that project too. So that's how we approached it. Okay.
Can you talk a bit about the amount of glazing and the amount of windows, particularly along the east elevation?
Well, part of that, I was saying it's, the less windows, the architecture of the existing house, the Helm house, is not significant. It's the association. So you're not trying to try and match the architecture on a contemporary addition really does not work. I mean, we tried to be sympathetic. And like I said, trying to, like the spiral stair, that form that's closest, we did that in glass, one for the transparency and one, it doesn't read as massive as if you made that wood with small windows. And so it actually reduces the mass. And that was the whole thing with the transparency and the glazing, that when you look at it, if you did that same rendering and you had that tall form with wood and some small windows in it, it would look twice as massive as it is. So this was a way to keep it simple, keep it transparent, keep it open, keep it light, feeling as light and airy. So you kind of contrast that with the existing, and in a sense, it's complementary to the historic. So when you look at the historic, you appreciate the historic, and you're going to see very little of that. We're talking about it like you're standing right there and everybody's going to stand right there and see it. When you look from the street, you're going to see just that small window. But it's very complementary, and I think the contrast, works, because the more you try and kind of mimic the existing or try and work with the existing, that you're actually fighting something that doesn't want to be there, and you'll end up with something a lot more uninteresting and complementary.
Thank you very much.
I'm wondering if, with everything that was discussed here today and kind of getting the sense of reading the room and understanding that there might have been miscommunication, whether things were considered or not considered by the city, if there's room, if we continued the hearing, if there was room for the city and the applicants to genuinely, try to get away from that entrenched position. And I'm saying that you're entrenched, either the city or the applicants, but maybe trying to find some middle
Mutual
ground, yeah,
Mhm.
to work. I don't know if that's possible. I know we wouldn't be continuing it for the improper reason of because we do have quorum, but I think it might be valuable for both parties. Maybe if that's a possibility, but that's on the applicant and the city.
So can we, so let's keep order though, because
Yeah.
we've opened and closed public comments. So are we, you just made a comment, but are we in public comment?
Well,
or
I
are
was directing it actually at,
I think towards a motion.
well, I was directing it to the applicant and the city. So I don't know if we close the public comment or the
So,
reopening of the hearing.
so we can let the applicant respond to that, and then we can close the public hearing, and then I'm happy to respond as well. And
And I think
turn it
Meg
back over to
wants
you
to
guys.
comment too. I don't know if you want.
Yes, I was hoping Meg would make some comments, please.
Good evening, Meg Clovis. I'm the historian on the project. The way a preservation plan starts is why a property is significant. And this property was significant because of its association with Frank Helm. And so aspects of integrity differ based on why a property is significant. And so the most important aspects of integrity for a property under criteria 1 and 2 are feeling and association. And so that's why we really made a big effort to keep the front elevation looking like Frank Helm's house. So in Bulletin 15, they say the big test for feeling and association is whether or not Frank Helm, if he rose from the grave and walked down the street, would he say, yes, there's my house? And we think that, yes, he would say that. We even kept that very wonky window in the gable end. We had no idea when it was put in, so we just let it stay. What I do want to say about the Page and Turnbull report is that there's some inconsistencies. I think Liam pointed out some of them. For example, the opening on the west elevation was not within the period of significance. It was put in about 15 years ago. Also, on the rear of the building, that had been totally altered. And so the hyphen is not going to be placed on historic materials. Plus, the whole idea of having an hyphen is to reduce the amount of materials that you need to remove. And then finally, I'll just say something, what John was talking about the glazing, I'll talk about the glazing in the hyphen. For bulletin 14, which is on the additions, right on the cover is a hyphen, a glazed hyphen. And I'll just say that I've worked on many projects that have, like, for example, the Baranda Adobe in Carmel Valley. They wanted to do a contemporary addition. They used a glazed hyphen to connect those two very historic Adobe building with the contemporary addition. So it's used all the time. It's not an anomaly. It's on the cover of bulletin 14. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think the applicant wanted to say.
Did you want to say something, Mr. O'Brien?
Yes. You asked about working with the planning department. I think we've thrown out all our concessions with the recent plans that we gave them. To Kent's point, we actually are willing to downplay the white structure and have it more of an earth tone color. Meg actually suggested that earlier on, and we tried to render that in our rendering, but it didn't quite come out the way we wanted it to. So, you know, I think that's probably as far as we're going to go, because we can't go any other direction. We can't go with a one story because it's, like I said, it's pointless. So the connection from the dormer, we're willing to forego and leave that alone. The glass rail, happy enough to do that. And what was the last section? There was one more section. But anyway, whatever it is, we submitted to the town, and I think that's as far as we can go. I don't see anything else that we could discuss unless Levi wants to speak to that. So.
I would like to say something because I've been sitting here thinking about a lot of the commissioners know I'm involved in Carmel Heritage Board. And Kent, you're very familiar with the architecture, the renovations, the total tearing down historic buildings and making them all modern. All modern. I know this because we've had those on our house tours in the past. And I guess what I was feeling like the others before I came in today, but you're keeping the historic structure. And that's very important to me. And we don't want to be really like Carmel with total tear downs, et cetera. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Kevin?
Yes, Carol.
And also, I think it's great that you're preserving the tobacco barn and the
Yes,
bathhouse,
the
even though
wash.
they're not considered historic. I mean, they're certainly a big part of Pelham himself.
Mhm.
Well, Carol, it's funny you say that, because part of it I thought, well, you can make a concession. You can take those buildings down, but then I thought exactly that's why I didn't say it. Because they're not considered historic, right? But yeah, it's part of the history of the property.
Just want to say, can we close the public hearing for?
Are we done?
Yes, I think we should conclude the public hearing. That's all right, Fernanda. So can we move to some kind of a motion
Well,
here?
I think-
Or, oh, Levi, I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
did
there was
say
a
you
question.
wanted to say something else.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
So as the applicant stated, we've been working with them for some time. And I do want to just respond to a couple of the things that were said. So as far as the length of the process, this is just how it works when you apply for a residential addition, a historic rezoning, and a Mills Act at the same time. They just can't process concurrently. You don't know if you're supposed to review something against historic standards if it hasn't been designated historic. So that's just kind of how it works when you do that at the same time. The other thing I wanted to respond to is there's been a lot of points made about, the usability of the property, incentivizing of the use of the historic property. Staff agrees with that 100%. But that is the entire purpose of the Mills Act contract program. And that has already been approved for this property.
Yeah.
So in terms of preservation of the property, in terms of incentivizing that preservation, that has already happened.
Yeah.
We're now talking about an expansion of non-historic features on a historically designated property.
Yeah.
Just want to bring that in.
Mhm. That's true. That is true.
So if this came to us in reverse order, would we have given this a Mills Act? I mean, this is not, maybe not a question to answer,
Well,
but
yeah.
the order, what Levi brings up, it raises pause. and question.
That is what I thought of looking at all this the last couple days, because the Mills Act is so recent too.
Yeah.
It just happened in the
Yeah.
last 6 months. So, um,
And there's not very many in the city. I mean, there's 60 something, 60.
right, 64, something
Yeah.
like that. Yes.
So there are
Wow.
standards, higher standards associated with H2 zoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To open the public comment again.
Are we going to open the public comment again? Mr. O'Brien wanted to make a comment. Fernanda, Levi.
It's to the discretion of the chair.
All right.
I promise not to ask questions if there's public comment.
All right, Mr.
I would
O'Brien, do you have
encourage only opening the public comment again if you have specific questions, because this is
Yeah.
getting,
Right.
this is very out of irregular.
Yes. All right. So Mr. O'Brien has to ask a specific
No, we have
question,
to
or
ask-
we?
No,
We have to
it-
ask a
All right.
question.
Okay.
the applicant has made presentations,
public
responds, allowed us to respond to comments and questions from the commission.
Okay.
So if the commission has questions, they can reopen the public hearing.
Here you go. What do you think about what have you heard since you last spoke?
There you go.
I would like to say when we went in to do the Mills Act, which we didn't know about really until we purchased the property, we did meet with planning and we discussed doing the Mills Act and the application in tandem. And just doing one after the other. And it turned out that we did actually end up having to do the Mills Act first, and then this followed. But the plan originally from back in our very first couple of meetings was to do it in tandem. That's all I have to say about that. It's not that we went in and got the Mills Act and then decided to do this later. This was always part of the plan.
I do remember your Mills Act application and coming here, and I seen your maintenance plan, and there was actually a request to modify the maintenance plan because it did have quite a lot of analysis to the new addition, which was not necessarily appropriate for what we were voting on.
Correct.
Right. Right.
That was it. You can close it again. We'll open it up in 5
All
minutes.
right. Can I close it, everybody?
Please.
I'm
There
over
are
you.
still no attendees with their hands raised online.
Okay, then let's go ahead and close.
Oh.
Did you have a comment?
No, I just saw a new attendee
A new,
participant. Is there
oh,
somebody online?
yeah, is that the same thing?
I think we have. 4 people
Spencer,
now.
somebody online right
Who
now?
wants To say something?
Just
I
hand
believe
raised.
that's just Fernanda on
Oh.
her computer.
Oh,
Okay.
There are no hands raised.
Uh,
all right. So I think we should make some type of motion, everyone.
I'll start.
All right, Julie.
This might be going on for a while. So I move for continuance. I would like to see resolution of the historic report,
Mhm.
some clear some revised plans or maybe some additional visual representation of, having the addition blend in with paint or something that we can see and not just kind of conceptual words. This is such a heavy decision, I think, for us.
Yes.
I think coming and working with staff to do that, to get back to us, I feel I would be better supported with that information to make the motion to approve. But at this point, I think continuance is the option here until we see the information.
Do we have a second
Oh,
on
sorry,
that?
About the historic, but you wanted historic support?
So I think the historic report and the peer report need to have some sort of resolution. Right now, there are some conflict. And I personally can't see that this is exempt until the reports are consistent. And then I would like to see some updated renderings, maybe for the color, what we were talking about, or some ways to show that, yes, it's compatible, but still differentiated. I know we had some discussion on scale and massing. We had different opinions here. There was a lot of discussion on the amount of glazing. And we heard, a lot of discussion from the applicant in support of
Windows.
that. Yeah,
Windows.
window glazing. Mhm.
Okay. All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'm sorry, before we have a second, was there a story pool requirement?
Yeah,
There's
I would like
still
this.
I
interest
was,
in
for-
that?
yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to include that. Okay, good. All right, so is there a second to the motion that Julie has just made?
I'll second it.
Okay, good. All right, then let's take a vote. I think, do you do an individual one here, Spencer, I believe? An individual roll call?
Commissioner Barlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson,
No,
Chair Cullum,
Yes.
and Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
So the motion passes.
Okay.
All right. So do we need to summarize this at all? Or can I just thank everyone for attending, the staff, the applicants, historians, and members of the public?
That's,
Yeah.
you can summarize if you want. You can summarize
I
the
think it's
motion
good.
and
You think?
I think it's good, yeah.
for the applicant.
Okay, I didn't exactly write that all down, but it looks like we're in favor of a continuance until what the city and the applicant get together to go over some of these issues that are questionable at this time, like addressing the glazing, the storied poles, what was,
The rendering.
oh, the renderings,
Rendering,
and possible talk about color.
and also reconciliation of the report and the peer review. To have
Okay,
some consensus.
reconciliation of the report and peer review. Is that about it then,
Mhm,
Julie?
mhm.
Okay,
And we have this meeting recorded and we'll reflect this in the minutes. So we'll also summarize that as well and we'll provide that to the applicant for
Okay.
city staff and the applicant.
all right, that's good. Thank you, Levi. All right. Any, so can we move on to any informal staff reports now?
Yes, so
Fernanda?
Spencer has provided a list of upcoming historical and cultural events.
Yeah, excellent, by the way.
Very long list.
I'm doing a lot of those, in fact, in the next couple weeks.
And so usually in July, we switch the chair and vice chair.
Yes, I
Um,
noticed that too.
But I don't know if we're going to have a July meeting.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're gonna come back with a redesign that soon. So we may not have a July meeting.
okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm gonna try to keep it at this item. Is there a guarantee that they're gonna wanna reconciliate, or maybe they just say goodbye? We're not doing.
Like I
it.
said, I could move into that house right now. It looks great. I mean, what they've done inside even.
yeah, no, I mean, I feel bad for them, but
I know, I do too, especially since they're Irish. You know, just like have all this green on.
I
But
mean,
anyway,
they may not take your recommendation and not do anything. I mean, it's up to them.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, because I was assuming July too, but it might be too quick.
I thought
Yeah.
that.
And I'll just note, there's a process in place for that. So if they choose not to, if they're unwilling to make those changes, they can come back before this commission. Will agendize the item. If you're unpleased with the progress that's been made, you can still have the options to deny the application. There's an appeal procedure for that to the planning commission. There's
Okay.
a process for all these
Okay.
options.
Well, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I feel better.
With regard, with regard to the chair, I'd like to suggest that we give Kathy another year since there were only 3 meetings this year. So can we, well, I guess you were going to have to look.
Yeah, we will,
I-
we'll take that
I
into consideration.
they'll
We'll prepare a
consider,
staff report
right.
for the recommended appointments for chair and vice chair,
I'd be okay with that if it's in accordance with the bylaws.
of course.
Okay, I'd also like to recognize Commissioner Dawson
Yes,
um,
I wanted to do that too.
because her term expires at the end of this month.
Oh,
And she has served for a number of years, and her dedication and service to the Historic Preservation Commission is very apparent and very, we thank her very much because
yes. How many years, Carol?
Yeah, it's been 8 years. I
8
started
years.
in 2016. I looked
Yeah.
it up and it has been an honor to serve on this commission. I do hope that the Mills Act is, that the suspension is lifted on the Mills Act so we can continue to preserve the historic properties in the city of Monterey. And I also hope that we can work towards a city ordinance to require that Mills Act properties be owner occupied, which I think was part of the problem that the council had. And then also there need to be penalties for not doing the required maintenance short of canceling the contract, because if the contract is canceled, that's a $250,000 fine.
Absolutely.
And people,
Yeah.
I mean, the city is very reluctant to do that, but there do need to be some intermediate measures to be sure that people do what's on their maintenance contract.
Mhm.
The
then-
way I see it, if I may,
Okay, go ahead.
it's freeloading on the community when
It
you get
is.
the Mills Act,
is.
and then you're not paying your fair share of
Yeah.
streets,
Yeah.
security, and you're getting the tax break.
Right,
We're all paying for it.
right. And
Mhm.
then one other thing I'd like to see the commission work on is, I know this is your big thing, demolition by neglect.
Yeah.
We need to have some kind of an ordinance against that. And on my final word is I'm leaving the commission in good hands. I feel really good about who we have on the board at this time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to pursue any other commission, Carol?
Not right now,
Not right now.
not
Okay.
immediately,
Okay.
maybe later.
Understand. Do we have any, since the term was up for several of you, do we have anyone new coming on board? Do we know, Levi? Or
We have not been clued in on that yet, so we will be reporting back on that whenever we. I know they've been having interviews and one with the mayor, so we should get news on that very, very soon. But we'll definitely report back to this commission.
All right, thank you for that. All right, then. I think we can adjourn the meeting. Everybody up for that?
So.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol.